Hi Ash, how's it going?
It's going super well. Hi, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining me in this call. I just noticed that I have Fluke's calendar here in the background.
Does that certify you as furry trash? I see Fluke butt.
Yeah, I only see the butt. That's all I can see.
Right there.
Oh boy.
I see you.
A while ago, one of my friends approached me and they were coming out as trans and they had a lot of questions and they asked me for help. And I was like, well, I honestly don't know because I've never looked into that topic too much and I wanted to help them. So I started looking around. One of the names that popped up was yours, Ash. So I was reaching out and I was like, well, Ash, would you have time to answer a few questions from someone that knows nothing about it? Here we are. And
yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to help. I mean, I think the hardest part about transition period is that there's not a whole lot of direct information on it out there. Like it can be a little bit difficult for folks to just figure out what's going on from the get-go. Mind you, that's changed a lot in recent years, but definitely was an issue when I started.
Tell us for a second about yourself.
Okay, well, my name is Ash. I go by Ash Coyote online. I have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/AshCoyote. It's super easy to find. I'm actually a documentary filmmaker by trade. I've been making films for the past 14, 15 years now. And I am also trans.
For people that don't know, can you explain briefly maybe what trans is?
Definitions are difficult because I just, I gotta say this from the get-go, especially when it comes to kind of discussing your identity. Identity is a very personal thing. It is incredibly personal, it is incredibly individualistic, and when we start kind of going down this rabbit hole, I think it's important to understand that my experience is different from everybody else's experiences. Though we might share some similarities, we are not the same person. And, just keep that in mind as I kind of go through this, because this is going to be told from my perspective.
Yeah, it's a very deep rabbit hole we're going into, so
It is. It's such kind of an interesting thing. So transgender is essentially identifying as a gender separate from the one that you were born as. So you'll hear the terms assigned male at birth, assigned female at birth. A lot, they're abbreviated AFAB and AMAB, I think, AMAB. AFAB, and that kind of is a way to kind of denote which way your journey went, I guess.
And I assume in that spectrum there's 100 variations between them. Yeah.
Oh yes. There's a lot between the lines, and that's kind of what I was getting at, is that really this is an experience that you kind of go through, a journey that you kind of go through on a very deeply personal level. It's questioning who you are.
Yeah.
A lot of people, like myself, we knew that we were trans since a very young age. I've known I was trans since, I would say, probably about 5 or 6. Mind you, that's not knowing the actual terminology.
Yeah.
A 5-year-old does not know the word transgender. Let me be clear on that. They might know it now, but I don't think that that's something that's just, addressed at that age. But, you might have certain tendencies. Maybe you gravitate towards a more feminine appearance. Maybe you only have, girlfriends instead of boyfriends, right? Maybe you knock stuff over on your desk.
Yeah.
Maybe there's this, maybe you want to play with dolls instead of G.I. Joes. I mean, these are all things that kind of fall under that early kind of development of self, right?
Yeah.
And as you grow older, which as the case for me, I discovered the terminology for transgender sometime around my teen years. I was searching on Google, right when Google came out. Wow, I'm old. I was like, what if you feel like you're a girl but you're a boy, I think is what I typed in or something like that. And I came across a website called TS Roadmap, and that gave me the term transgender.
Okay.
That's where I first heard. Yeah.
Was it like a relief when you found it, or were you actually like scared, or like, because I feel like you go through a lot of emotions in that process. So.
Well, at first it was kind of like morbid fascination because you're like, wait, this is actually a thing? Like,
oh yeah, the feeling that you're not alone.
I'm not a freak.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like surprise. Holy crap! Like there's this very real thing, and it's a medical condition, and there's a treatment for it, and I can fix it. And like, oh my God, this is like. It was just mind-blowing at that point, I think. I mean, like, mostly I was just like, I remember reading up a lot on it. I was looking up everything. I was looking at like, oh, hey, this is how you get, hormone therapy. This is how you do all this stuff. And really what kind of got to me at that point when I was, like, this would have been when I was about 18, 19. I saw a lot of roadblocks put in the way by psychological professionals and medical professionals, because like for one reason or another I think there's kind of like this tendency to try to gatekeep access to access to hormones. So like when I was starting to go through this, they still required me to get 2 letters to get my HRT. So I had to have a letter from a psychologist and a letter from a therapist, and I had to present those to my doctor.
Oh wow. My
doctor would review them, and they would say, oh, okay, you're transgender. Here's a prescription. We're going to start you out like this, and you get to go for it, right? It was a very highly regimented process at that point. Yeah.
So when you crossed that bridge where you were like, well, I want to like explore hormones and all that, was that when you were already basically on your own, or were you still like dependent on your parents or something like that?
Well, for my story, it's kind of a little weird. So right as I was kind of discovering all this stuff, I was kind of getting ready to, come out. And then there was a lot of things that kind of happened in my family, a lot of personal stuff that kind of got in the way, and I was just like, oh shit, like I can't do this right now, like if I were to do this, like it would make my parents just like lose it, and like all this other stuff. And so I just put it on hold. I kind of put it on the back burner. And I will say this too, like those little, like those little roadblocks that they put in the way with, like the medical stuff did scare me off for a little bit too. I mean, it's a big deal when you're 18 and you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to go talk to 2 therapists and try and prove this aspect of my identity, something that's been bothering me my whole life, to somebody who I don't even know, right? And like, I had asked my parents at the time to see a therapist. The only person they would let me talk to was like a pastor, and I was like, no, we're not talking about that today. Like this is no. Like, so it definitely kind of leaves a lasting impact on you. I didn't transition until I was 27.
Okay. Yeah.
So like I mean that took away, like 9 years.
Yeah, I can see that being like scary. Like you're already like you're on your path figuring out who you are, and now you have to justify it to 2 other people. It's like I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and like it's so dependent on the people that you end up engaging with too. That's the scarier part about kind of like transition, at least when I was first starting to look into it and go through it. I got to emphasize here too that there's a lot that's changed for the better. There's still issues in place where people have issues accessing hormones or issues accessing like gender affirming surgery because of these roadblocks, but it's improved over the years, just not very fast.
Yeah. Who was like the first person you came out to? Like, was it a friend or was it family?
Initially, I tried to talk to my mom. And like, I brought up a few things trying to test the waters. You know, like, anybody in the LGBT community, you know, if you've come out, you kind of know the process, right? You know, like usually you're kind of like testing the waters, you're seeing, you know, like you're poking and prodding around. You're just like, okay, you know, like, do you think that you might accept me like this? And to see what they say. Or I have a friend that did this, what do you think? That kind of thing. You know, like I was very like strategic about it because I had a lot of other things, you know, like that I was trying to deal with too. And I think really the first person I ever told that I was transgender was my husband. And that was just before we got married. It's a story. It was kind of really. It was really weird. So I met Chip when I was 21. We have been together for a very long time. I'm turning 33 this year, so we've been together that long.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
right?
Congrats.
So like when I turned 27, they just legalized gay marriage interstate, and I was like, okay, you know, we've been together a while. It'd be nice to get married, but you know, like me being me, I was like, this is a big legal commitment. I don't want to lie to my husband. I don't want to tell him something, you know, and like literally engage in a legal contract with him without him knowing exactly who I am, right? And like, I had this really weird plan that totally imploded on itself. I was like, oh, you know, like we're gonna hang out and, you know, like we'll have a couple drinks and I'll just kind of talk about it. And like ultimately the whole experience is me crying in a hot tub with maybe a little bit too much to drink. And Chip just looking at me like, okay. You know, like we still got married, you know, like long story short. Obviously we're still together.
That's
so,
a good sign.
Yeah, you know, happy endings, but I mean, even that, sadly, is an exception to the rule with a lot of trans folks. I mean, a lot of relationships, unfortunately, don't make it through transition just because of, you know, like one thing or another. You know, like people often accuse trans people of, you know, dishonesty. And I mean, I myself in my own language just now, you know, like almost implied that. But like the thing of it is you can only come out when you're ready, you know, like you got to ask yourself, you know, like as a member of the LGBT community specifically, you know, like there's a time before you came out. Nobody comes out like as like a baby, like straight out the womb, right? You know, like you're not singing show tunes and dancing straight out. That's not a thing. Like it's something that happens over time, and you know, like people change over time, and you know, like that's normal. And I think people just really need to understand that, you know, like this process. You know, the whole process of discovering your identity takes a long freaking time. It's not instant. It's not overnight. It takes many years. It takes life experience and sometimes hardship and challenges. But eventually, you know, you do find yourself and you settle and you end up, you know, like maybe like me, you know, like some weirdo on the internet. But yeah.
A very good weirdo though. I feel like we're all kind of weird, but in a good way.
We are. Embrace the weird. Yeah. Be weird, you know?
Yeah. Did you feel better or worse like after you told Chip, or like?
Oh, after I came out, I felt like the weight of the world lifted off my shoulders. I felt so much better. I felt like just that small step was probably the most monumental step in my whole journey. Yeah. Right there was just like, I had to get over that one hurdle, which is telling the person that mattered the most to me in my life who I actually was. And like, I mean, it's a lot for anybody to take in, but certainly, you know, like I appreciate, you know, like Chip so much in my life. You know, he's a very special person. He's my sweetheart. You know?
Did you after that also tell like your family? How and when did that happen? I guess
that it actually it was kind of funny. Like once I got over, like coming out to Chip, everything else was just kind of a cascade at that point. I was just like, boom, we're just doing this. Like I was like, I think 2 days later, I called my mom up and I'm just like, hey, I'm transgender, and she's like, kind of makes sense. I eventually, like I told my dad, I told my mom first and like my sister first, and then like I told my brother over text, and like it all kind of happened in rapid succession after that. Like I came out and I was just like, fuck it. Everybody's gonna know.
Yeah.
I'm tired of hiding this. Everybody's gonna know. I think the only people that I didn't tell immediately were folks that I worked with. Because, like at the time, it was kind of like a need to know basis. It's like before you start the quote unquote, like physical transition. So before you start taking hormones and start, like dressing as yourself, I don't dress very feminine. But like as soon as you start like being yourself more, that's kind of when you start coming out to like like maybe colleagues at work and stuff. But it was mostly just kind of my core support group that I came out to and let them know, and it was a great experience. I think the person that had the hardest time understanding it in my family was my dad. My dad has a background in psychology. He specifically focused in like special education, like early intervention with autism and stuff like that. And, like for him, I think it was really hard because, like him kind of coming from that field and then realizing that, like their child was different and like they didn't notice. I think that was probably the hardest one, because like I got a lot of questions from him early on. I was like, I never thought of this, and I think that's just kind of it, is like people like view like gender as gender stereotypes, right? And that means that, like if you don't adhere to like the 1950s housewife aesthetic, I guess, like then, oh, you can't possibly be transgender. There's no way, right? Wrong. I mean, come on, guys, like, what's, I know plenty of like masculine gals, and I know so many effeminate guys. I mean, God, fandom, come on. We're all 7 shades of fabulous here. It's okay, like own it, right? I don't know. It's just interesting to like see and experience.
Yeah, I was worried about my dad, and when I told him, he like didn't care. I was like, oh, really? But the thing he told me is that for a parent, there's a coming out too to his friends, that now they have like a gay son, or in your case, I guess a trans daughter. I don't know, like, did you experience something like that from your family, or?
Oh yeah. Oh totally. No, like that was like a thing. I mean, so like, I came out twice. I came out as gay because I obviously moved in. My boyfriend at the time.
Oh, your roommate.
My roommate. That we share the same room.
Yeah.
Right?
Bunk beds. Wait, there are no bunk beds?
No bunk beds? No bunk. What do you mean there's no bunk beds? I thought that you had. Yeah, no, exactly. It's just like, what? Oh, God. There was a point where we actually had like an emergency like setup. So like if like Chip's family came over, like I had a separate bed.
Oh.
Where I could go sleep, because his family was a little bit more conservative than mine. So like, I came out twice. I came out as gay, and then I came out as trans. When I came out as gay, my family was kind of like they had like a similar coming out process, you know, like friends and family as your parents did. You know, like they were like, oh, you know, like we have a gay son, and like this person, you know, like oh, you know, like they're dating so and so and all this, and like it was an adjustment period. But like it was really funny the second time I came out. It was just kind of like all the lights clicked on for everyone, and they were just like, ah, makes sense now. I'll give you a count. This is the intermission. Cue music. I've learned that out of suit, I just like making dumb faces at the camera, and I love it, and it's just something that I can't turn back from now, and I'm just like, look, it's me. Look, I'm making a fool of myself. Oh my God, I put this out on the internet. Why?
Yeah. I'm gonna get there too.
The only negative experiences I had in transition, weirdly enough, were from the LGBT community within the furry community.
Oh, really?
People are just like, oh, no, there's no way you could be trans, you know? Like, you always worked out. You had muscles. You liked cars. You liked guns. And I'm like, you know, the funny thing is, I still like all those things.
Yeah.
But guess what? I'm still trans. Deal with it. Come on, guys.
Those are not gender-exclusive properties.
Right. I mean, like, my mom was a cowgirl, right? Like, you know, she rode horses, shot guns, drank liquor, you know, like that was my female role model. Boom, there you go. So, I mean, it's interesting how people's, you know, like, upbringing affects their views on gender stereotypes.
Yeah.
Because of the way that I had to go through my transition, you know, like I used to think that stuff was super rigid, and now I don't. But, you know, like that's a part of kind of like the journey, is learning that this isn't the same for everybody, that, you know, like this is something that is, you know, like inherently you, and that you need to kind of figure it out for yourself, and that mistakes will be made, and that's okay, and like there's no harm in trying and figuring it out. Like asking the question itself is one thing that I wish every single person would do. I mean, think about it. How many cisgendered people sit back and they're like, I wonder if I'm a boy or a girl? They don't question it. They never do. They accept reality as it's presented to them. I mean, it's good to ask these, you know, like, quote unquote, maybe philosophical questions about yourself too. You know, like it opens your mind to other experiences and your ability to kind of learn and grow past. I mean, I think that, you know, like the trans experience is quite possibly the most human experience, because you're forced to look inward at yourself and explore who you are. A lot of times people hyperfixate on different elements of sexuality, right? So like specifically the question, the big thing that happens to every single trans person is, what is going on in your pants? Like anybody fucking cares. I mean, like that's a highly personal thing, right? So like this is where things start to get kind of messy when it meshes with, you know, like the LGBT community, because you're dealing with, you know, like queer spaces that are generally sex positive and more open, but people that tend to be, how should I put this, less open to something different, not understanding that it's like, so let's say you weren't in a relationship and you met this wonderful guy, nice guy that you absolutely fall for. Y'all start dating, and, you know, like before anything ever happens, you know, like before the relationship is consummated, they come out to you as trans. They say, hey, I'm a trans man. How does that make you feel?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, like, it's always like it's always
right?
tricky. Like the what I say now and what I will actually do is like, I try to be as close to what my actions would be, but then when you're in that situation, I feel like you might respond differently just because in the moment, like, I don't have time to think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's definitely kind of like, it's one of those situations where it's like, you know, it brings to question kind of like this idea of like, is sexuality tied to like, quote unquote, genitalia?
Mm.
Is it tied to attraction, as in like your physical form? Is it tied to personality? Is it tied to, you know, like forms of connection? You know, like that's why I see, you know, like I myself kind of tend to gravitate more towards kind of like this identity of pansexual, because I you know, like I find that for me personally, again, highly individualistic, right? It's an attraction based on personality and self rather than whatever's going on elsewhere, right? It's about the person and not the thing. Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of an interesting question to broach, though, isn't it? Yeah. Because like you're like, wait a second.
I mean, I would also appreciate their honesty. Like, you know, like it's like you said, like it's a scary process to open up to someone. So like you want to acknowledge that they're doing something that is good and not that they're doing a step backwards.
Essentially, for a trans person to have a relationship, they have to out themselves as trans. Even if in every other facet of their life they exist as themselves, they will always be labeled as trans by others, which is kind of a blessing for some and a curse for others. It depends on how you sit with your identity. For a lot of folks, it's a curse. I mean, it really sucks. I mean, for me personally, I exist in between. I'm kind of a weirdo. And I am like wholly comfortable with kind of like my androgyny and my weirdness and kind of like my identity. And that's taken a long time for me to get there, and not everybody's gonna find that piece in between. I did, but that's me, right? But I think it's a very interesting kind of thought experiment for people out there in the audience even, you know, like think about this for a second. What would it mean, you know, like to you if your partner came out to you as trans? I mean, does it change anything, right? Like, if you love the person one way, do you still love them the other?
Yeah.
I think it's a real question for a lot of people that I think they should ask, you know? I mean, really at the end of the day, I mean, like, for me, is, do you like really care about that person? Or is this just like a sexual transaction for you?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of it in my eyes. I mean, it's kind of cuts down to kind of like a very superficial nature, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you know, like as a trans person, I would like that kind of stuff not to matter, but I know that for other people it does, and like it's hard to kind of interlink those worldviews.
So there's a lot of people that are in the position of like they're discovering themselves, they think that they might be trans. They are, for example, debating if they should talk with family or friends. Is there any like advice you can share with them?
So my first piece of advice that I give to almost anybody who hits me up and is like, hey, I think I might be trans. I always tell people, just don't be afraid to experiment, right? You know, like, sometimes you need to kind of go through this phase of experimentation where you kind of like try on these different identities, you know, like take for example pronouns, right? You know, like take a close and trusted friend and, you know, like try on a pronoun. It's like trying on a shirt, right? You know, just instead of, you know, like he, him, maybe say, hey, can you use the pronoun she, her with me? And, you know, like if it doesn't fit you, if it doesn't work, if you don't feel like that's you, guess what? You don't have to keep it. You don't have to, you know, like do that kind of stuff. But like, really that first part of the process is just, you know, like a process of self-discovery, testing yourself, finding ways to explore yourself. And then when you eventually get around to the point where you're like, hey, I'm pretty sure that this is me, and I am ready to come out. I'm ready to tell people. Well, the next thing that you do is you kind of sit back and you come up with a plan, honestly. I mean, I think that just jumping into it it can be good and bad. I don't necessarily recommend just, like taking the shotgun approach. Like try and think out like who you want to come out to first. You want to make sure that you have a support system in place. Maybe you have a support system of other trans people or queer people that understand what you're going through, but make sure that you try and set up that support system too. And you can find that anywhere. I mean, maybe it's a close and trusted friend, maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's, like I don't know, like maybe it's somebody online, right? That's a pretty common thing nowadays. A lot of people meet on like forums, message boards, instant messengers, VR chat now, right? Like people bump into each other in all sorts of ways, and like just kind of finding people that click with that, where you're able to kind of lay out the foundations for support is really important. And then you actually come out and you start telling people. I would say be prepared. Be prepared for any eventuality. In most cases, people will be okay. It won't be a big deal. In some cases, it will be a huge deal. Sometimes people will come around. Don't expect everybody's, initial reaction to be positive, because in a lot of cases, especially with, queer identity, it might not be. It might take some time. It took my dad some time. It took my dad about a year, I would say, to really kind of accept things and understand things. And now he's so supportive. He's super supportive. He's a professor, administrator out at a university in Portland, and he he wears like the trans pride like tassels and stuff, on his
gown?
What do they call that? It's like they're like cords, yeah, like on his gown when he does like the graduation ceremony. And like my mom has a trans pride flag hanging up in the window, and it goes to Pride now, and like those things happen over time. It's not like boom, instantaneous, like you got like super accepting parents. If you are super lucky, you get that. Most people aren't that lucky. It takes time. It takes time for people to understand. They have to go through their own process of understanding. Remember, this is something that you've been living with your whole life that they probably didn't know. I mean, that's a lot to take in, and it can take a little bit of time or a lot of bit of time to really get to the point where, like everything's kind of the way it should be, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely can relate to like give it time. Like people need time to adjust. Some people don't even know what it means, so they're like, okay, so like what does this mean? Or like, and then some people just need to realize that you're not. I mean, even though it might be a visual transition too, or in some aspects you're still the same person. Like you're still you. Like some features might have changed a little bit, but. I mean, like, or the pronoun. I don't know. I don't want to downplay the transition or anything, but I mean, like, the personality behind it doesn't change that, or the person behind it is not that much different for me. Like.
Well, I mean, I think that you really kind of hit the nail on the head there. I mean, that's one of the important takeaways is that when we look at identity, who you are as a person, isn't necessarily changing. Yeah. It's this skin suit that we're in, right? It's a physical change, a physiological change that happens through transition, where you line yourself up to be in line with who you are on the inside. That person on the inside didn't change, right? Like the core of who I am and the core of who I was pre-transition is still the same right now. Like I would say if you were to talk to Chip and you were to ask Chip and be like, oh hey, you know, like how much has Ash changed? How much has Ash changed? How much has Ash changed? Well, you know, he'd probably be like, you know, not a whole lot. I mean, there's been like, you know, like I'm mentally way better off. I feel better. I'm a happier person. I'm not depressed all the time. I am more confident. But the person that I was before transition and the person that I am now are largely the same.
I feel like we covered a good variety of topics. So is there,
Yes, we
is
did.
there something else you wanted to add?
So if you are out there questioning your identity, if you're struggling right now, be sure to look around you. Look and build up that support system. Look for resources online. There's a lot that are out there now. So I'm going to link Tirox a bunch of resources that he can put down in the description below for you. But really, the important thing is just to kind of, you know, take it one step at a time. We're here for you. The community is here for you. We, you know, like, we all undergo different journeys in life, and this is quite possibly one of the most magical experiences and one of the most human experiences. It's going to be okay. And just remember, if you're having trouble, if you're struggling, don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah. I was thinking of something I could say, but you summed it up really good. Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks so much, Ash, for taking the time today and giving me a crash course on answering all my questions.
Of course!
Yeah.
Oh my god, it was a pleasure being on. Thank you so much for having me. I'm always happy to share stuff about the trans community.
I'm gonna put a link to Ash's channel somewhere here, or here, or here, here, or here. And check her out, watch out the fandom if you haven't already, and then watch the Hero and all the other four documentaries coming out this year. Maybe 5? 10?
We're going for 10.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
Every month another one.
Good God.
Good God, yeah.
Goals.